The nationwide effort to fight racism is shedding new light on the financial imbalances between races in this country. Listen to these numbers. Just 44% of black Americans own their home that they live in, and that's compared to more than 73% of white Americans. The economic imbalance also extends into the banking industry. CBS News special correspondent, that's Alex Wagner, joins us now. Alex, good to see you. Good morning to you. What role did the banks play in this huge racial wealth gap?
Yeah, Gail, the numbers are pretty stark when you look at lending to minorities from big banks versus black-owned financial institutions. As you know, home ownership skews heavily towards white Americans, and owning a home is considered among the best ways to build wealth. And home ownership almost always starts with a loan, the mortgage.
This is the home that I purchased with the Hope mortgage loan.
10 years ago, it was unclear if 31-year-old Brittany Williams would ever become a homeowner.
The credit wasn't as good as it could be because of some things I did in high school with mismanaging credit. At that point, I didn't have any idea of how I could make it better.
With few resources and poor credit, the big banks didn't seem interested in helping her build a solid financial foundation.
I didn't think they were trying to help me.
She wasn't alone. African Americans remain underserved by America's largest financial institutions. Nearly half of all black Americans either have no bank or are underbanked, meaning they lack access to financial services like credit cards and loans. That's almost double the rate of the country as a whole. So Williams went elsewhere. Hope Credit Union, a black-owned financial institution.
I felt like they would give me a better understanding of which path I should be going down. And the branch manager, she instantly was telling me about certain loans that could help me reestablish my credit.
With that help, Williams fixed her credit. At 26, she qualified for a home mortgage.
And I was able to finance the house, my first home.
Black-owned banks, like Hope, can play a critical role in building African-American financial security.
We have to look at the context and the reality of deep racial wealth inequality, racial economic inequality that's been part of this country since its founding. So when you have very little wealth of your own, median wealth for blacks being about $3,600, it's that much harder to get a loan because, you have to have some type of savings, right?
Diedrich Asante Mohammed is with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition.
Banks have played a role that most of society has played. They've reflected society, and a society that was not looking forward to bring African Americans in as part of their practices, their inclusion. So African Americans didn't feel that banks were something to serve them.
In the last decade alone, 3 major national banks have paid hundreds of millions in federal settlements for alleged racial discrimination, something that's been part of the American lending system for nearly a century. Through a practice called redlining, loans were denied in largely black neighborhoods. The courts have since deemed it illegal. To counter discriminatory practices, black-owned banks were born.
We really are the catalyst for our communities.
Cynthia Day, president and CEO of Citizens Trust, says black-owned banks like hers help break a cycle of poverty.
We can get you into the system, and then we can let you elevate from product to product and get you into mainstream banking relationship. So we go from credit builders to wealth builders.
Today at black-owned banks, 33% of mortgage loans go to African Americans versus less than 3% at banks that are not black-owned.
Black Lives Matter!
It's that kind of inequality that's helped fuel protests across the country. And just as white Americans joined black Americans on the streets, joining a black-owned bank can be an important act of unity.
Your money can count in ways that I think a lot of people haven't even considered.
Absolutely. You can support addressing racial inequality without solely being on the streets protest. You need to incorporate that in your everyday life, how you spend your everyday dollars, your everyday investments. That will help create the long-term change that we need so desperately in this country.
So on Tuesday, Netflix announced a $10 million investment in Hope Credit Union, the bank in that story, which Hope says they will use to fund more than 2,500 entrepreneurs, homebuyers, and consumers of color over the next 2 years. Tony?
It's powerful stuff. These black-owned banks can help counter discrimination in the present, but there is that historical context, that long history, and there may be something more that needs to be done to address that. There was a great piece over the weekend by Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's been at our table, about the need for reparations. That's another R word that a lot of people don't want to talk about. All right, Alex, thank you very much.